All right. So, Matt, you know who I saw today?
Who's that?
Everyone I looked at. All of them. You don't like my vision joke? That's a shame. That's how I roll. Double.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Graveyard. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Adam.
And my name's Matt.
Now, pull up a tombstone or settle into your casket and get comfortable because this is Graveyard Tales. All right, everybody, here we are again. Matt, how you doing tonight, brother?
Man, I am fantastic. It is good to be back.
Oh, yeah. You guys won't have realized this, but Matt and I have been not in the graveyard for the past 2.5 weeks because we actually went on vacations and stuff like that. A little while back, we posted a vacation catch-up episode on Patreon that you can go check out if you would like. You can go to patreon.com/graveyardtales. And you can find that and a bunch of other shows that we put out in there. Matt, they're not like normal Graveyard Tales shows.
No, they're different topics. They're a lot looser, more casual. And they're fun. So yeah. You should check them out if you haven't already.
Absolutely. We try to do the fun stuff on there. Keep it interesting, and it's not always ghost haunted places or cryptids. It's, in fact, a lot of times it's not. It's the other things that fascinate us that we try to put on our Patreon.
Yeah. So
go check that out, patreon.com/graveyardtales if you're not already a patron. Also, we want to thank the Podbelly Network. Go to podbelly.com. You can find different shows to listen to, and all of them are great people, and it's great company to be with. So go check them out, podbelly.com. We also want to thank tonight's sponsors, BestFiends and HelloFresh. And we'll talk a little bit more about them later. But right now, we just want to say, guys, if you can, go check out our sponsors. If you use our code or the URL that we provide, it really does help us out. It not only helps the company out, but it helps Graveyard Tales out. And it means the sponsors will keep coming back if you guys do that.
That's right. So, check them out. Even if you decide, this product's not right for me or whatever, just go and check them out. The traffic shows that, our sponsors are getting some value, for sponsoring the show.
Right. All right, Matt. So, things are starting to get back to normal finally, and people are getting out there and doing things this summer. But that also means we're going to be standing in lines a lot more. Mm-hmm. There's more people out there to be standing. We're going to be waiting a lot more than we were before because people are out there doing things. And I've noticed that what I've started doing when I'm standing in line somewhere waiting, like going to the grocery store and it's packed, or you're waiting in line to go to the movies or something like that, I've been pulling out BestFiends and playing BestFiends because I don't have to have an internet connection. My data doesn't even have to be that great. And it's a good way to distract myself from the hordes of people that I'm standing around and kind of fall into this world of killing slugs and matching different items, and it's great. It really helps with my anxiety when I'm out places because it gets me into that little BestFiends world.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like a little refresher. I mean, you work during the day and you need to take a little break, just kind of clear your mind. This is a great way to do it. Playing BestFiends, the bright colors and the funny characters, they really do kind of give you that, okay, I'm I feel a little bit better. I'm a little refreshed, and I can move on with my day. And I'll tell you, Amanda and I play. She is quite a bit better than I am. But one thing, we're out camping. We have no internet service, but every once in a while, you're just sitting back and, hey, you know what? You can still whip out your phone and play BestFiends.
Right.
Because Adam said it doesn't rely on an internet connection. You can just sit down and play anytime, anywhere. And it's great. It's a lot of fun. It's easy to pick up and just start playing immediately. So you can go and download the 5-star rated puzzle game BestFiends for free today on the App Store or Google Play. That's Friends without the R, BestFiends.
That's right. Download the 5-star rated puzzle game BestFiends free today on the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Remember, that's Friends without the R, BestFiends. So, Matt, that's all I got for housekeeping. Keep it short and sweet this time for the haters out there that don't like our long intros. But why don't you tell us, Matt, what are we talking about tonight, brother?
Tonight, we are going to travel to Salzburg, Austria, and we are going to discuss one of the most haunted castles there.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Moosham Castle, but it also has a much more sinister name. It's also known as the Witch's Castle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, how in the world could a place that's called the Witch's Castle not be haunted?
No joke, right? That's got to have some wild things happening there.
Yeah, and it's got some definite activity there. But for this place, much like when we talked about Lep Castle a few years ago, sometimes the history of a place is so horrific.
Right.
That you just sometimes the history itself is scarier than the paranormal activity, and I think that may be true for Moosham Castle. I think it's probably a 50-50 split at Lep Castle.
Yeah.
Both are pretty bad. But the history of Moosham Castle, I was really surprised that I had not come across this more frequently than I had.
Right. I'm with you.
With the things that we look into and research, we will find other things, especially when we come across some topic that we're looking at and it's on a list, Yeah. This is the, the most haunted farm. This is the most haunted battlefields. This is the most haunted, hotels, whatever.
Most haunted saddle. Yeah.
We have researched, when I see these lists of the most haunted castles now, I'm looking and I'm like, out of 10, we've talked about at least half of them.
Yep.
How have I not noticed this one before? Especially when you consider the history that it has.
That's the crazy part. With the history that it has, you'd think we would have heard somebody talking about it or something before now.
Right. But it did come up, and I'm glad it did. And we decided we were going to investigate, what's going on at this place, and we're going to share it with you tonight. But first, we're going to give you this crazy history. Okay?
Oh yeah. And as we always say, go check our sources. You can find those at the bottom of our show notes, and that way you can, continue the research into it if you're interested. And, a lot of people do a lot of research on these places, people that are able to go there when Matt and I aren't able to go there. So it's good to, get what they have to say and then them get credit for it. So go check out our sources if you're interested. Now, this says that it's believed that Moosham Castle was built on the foundations of a Roman castrum, but there are no traces of the earlier structure remaining for anyone to see, really. So they built it into the Roman castrum. Well, you're probably thinking, what is a Roman castrum? So
I know I was.
Yeah, right. So I'll tell you, a Roman castrum says in the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, the Latin word castrum referred to a building or a plot of land used as a fortified military base. Now, the World History site says, although given basic defensive features, forts were never designed to withstand a sustained enemy attack, but rather to provide a protected place for accommodations and storage facilities for food, weapons, horses, and administrative records. Over the centuries, Roman forts took on a remarkably standardized layout, and the impressive gates and ruins of some of the larger ones can still be seen across Europe today. So, as they were moving through their empire, they would build one of these castrums in a place and house their soldiers, and they would stage there and then go out and fight and try to conquer as they were taking over other people's lands. That's just kind of how, as they moved, so would a castrum, and that's how they're in so many different places. And that's one was put here where Moosham is, and apparently they thought, okay, I'm going to build up on this because it's already here. Now, this says that the date on the original deed to the castle is 1191. So it's believed that is when the construction on the castle was started. However, I've seen once or twice where people have said the castle is older than this and that we just don't have records for that history. And so they label this as the, quote, Dark Ages of Moosham. But for our purposes, we're going to go with 1911, since this is the most common date that I've seen. And we can't find any dates prior to that. It's just hearsay that, it was there and no records were kept, and it just popped up in 1191.
He said 1911. He meant 1191.
Yes, I did. 1191.
Easy mistake. There's a bunch of ones and a 9 in there.
Oh, dude, yeah. So 1191. Sorry about that. We're still getting comments, Matt, from an episode that we did where one of us, I don't even remember who it was, you or me, we misspoke and we said somebody ruled in this castle from 1790 to 1997 instead of 1797.
Yeah, I remember.
And this was like a year and a half ago. And I still see comments pop up on YouTube. Man, he sure ruled for a long time. Okay, guys, I get it. We misspoke. We didn't correct it. So I get it. But that was a year and a half ago, Yeah. So I'm glad you caught me on that one, because I wouldn't want to have that another year and a half of something else. So yeah, for our purposes, we're going with 1191 because that's the most common date. Now, after 1191, there's a gap in the historical records again for about 100 years. Now, the next mention is in 1285 when it was seized by the Prince Archbishops of Salzburg. In the 14th century forward, the castle was the residence of the Episcopal Burgrave. Now, what is a Burgrave? This just like the castrum, we got to kind of look at what this is. Well, a Burgrave, the definition of that is the governor or hereditary ruler of a German town or castle. So, basically, just another name for the ruler of this castle in that area, that town that it's in, Salzburg. Now, in the late 15th century, the control of the castle was taken over by Prince Archbishop Leonard von Ketchkok. When he took over,
I'm sorry. I'm in 6th grade.
Yeah, that's all right. I don't even know if I said it right, but that's what I'm going with. And, Ketchcock is what came out. I'll just say Leonard from now on. When he took over, he began huge rebuilding and extension projects. A lot of the castle that you see today actually came from this building project. So it stood from the 15th century till now, and that's kind of the facade that we see today when we look at Moosham Castle.
Yeah, and it's so cool looking.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, German castles are kind of, they're cool anyway, with the hills and everything behind them and the way, they almost look like, how in the hell did you get to it?
Right.
You know, because they look like they're kind of stuck out in the middle of nowhere on the side of this mountain.
Did you have hovercraft to fly into your castle?
Yeah, you know, these drone photographs of these places now, they're so cool. And Moosham it's really cool looking. I mean, it's just, you know, when you compare it to other castles in the area, I mean, it's got one of the coolest looks.
Right, it does. And we'll post some pictures of those. Probably some on Facebook and then some in Patreon as well. Don't know if y'all heard Dallas. He wanted to be heard today. He barked. So Dallas says hi. Now in 1520, Moosham became an administrative seat of the Lungau region. And during this time, 1524 to 1525, the castle was besieged due to the German Peasants' War. So we gotta look at the German Peasants' War a little bit because it's kind of crazy what happened to this. Now, just picture this is all happening in and around Moosham Castle. So the grounds of Moosham Castle is what's seeing most of this. Now, the German Peasants' War, it was inspired by changes brought by the Reformation. Peasants in Western and Southern Germany invoked divine law to demand agrarian rights and freedom from oppression by nobles and landlords. So they're fighting for their freedom here from the nobles. As the uprising spread, some peasant groups organized armies. During this German Peasants' War, the short time it was going on, 100,000 peasants lost their lives.
Good Lord.
So you got this happening right on the lands of Moosham. And as we've talked before, this kind of bloodshed creates a stain that sticks around for a long time in an area.
Mm-hmm. It sure does. And, you know, that the whole serfdom system, you know, it didn't, what's the word I'm looking for? It didn't really lend itself to pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
Right.
It pretty much said, this is what you are because of how you were born, and this is what you're destined to do for your entire life.
Right.
And, you know, you're gonna constantly live in the shadows of these wealthier landowners, and you're never gonna make it.
Right. And the peasants got tired of that.
Yeah.
And so they revolted, fighting for, like it said, you know, they invoked divine law to demand agrarian rights and freedoms. So you also have to think that the reason so many peasants lost their lives is, if you think back to what you know about those times, the peasants weren't the ones with the strong swords and shields and spears. They were using homemade weapons or sickles and scythes and stuff against armies. These armies led by the nobles who had armor and shields and spears and swords. And these people are still fighting those armies, but that's why there were so many casualties around that area.
Yeah.
And so
you're not gonna defeat a guy on a horse with armor and a sword with a broomstick that you've sharpened. It's just not going to work.
No, it's not like the movies where, Jean-Claude Van Damme can come in there with a rubber band and kill 100 people. There's going to be quite a bit of loss of life on the peasant side, and it was. And, the clashes were there around Moosham, so the blood stained that area quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there were numerous wars and conflicts in and around this castle during this time due to, passing crusaders, multiple Austrian-Hungarian wars, the Flemish Revolt, and even the Italian wars. They all happened around this area. So you've got a ton of violence, a ton of bloodshed and energy being pumped into this castle. Stone tape theory, if you believe that, the walls of this castle are just recording all of this and holding it in. So, just right there, we could stop right there. And I would say, this place probably has some spirits tripping around this place.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Now, when you add all these together, and then add the witch trials, you can start to understand the amount of death, violence, and bloodshed that Moosham has seen. Witch trials, huh? Yes, you heard me right.
That's right.
Witch trials. And that's why Matt called it the Witch's Castle in the beginning. Now, the witch trials, which happened in Austria between 1675 and 1690, were directed from Moosham Castle. This was the home base of where it happened. Now, this says that one of the largest, bloodiest, and most famous witch trials in Austria was this witch's trial. And unlike the witch trials in Salem, a majority of the victims of these trials were males.
Yeah. I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, it is. Because in most other places, most notably Salem, which we've talked about, it was females that were burned and accused of being witches and everything. And not the case in Austria. This was now, some women did lose their lives during the witch trials, but it was mostly males. Now, this says in 1675, Barbara Colleran was put on trial for theft and sorcery in Salzburg, together with a Paul Kauthenpacker. I think I did okay with that.
I'm looking at it now, and I don't think I could have done any better.
So, Paul. Now, during torture, she confessed that her son, Paul Jacob Kohler, had a pact with Satan. Her partner, Kaltenbacher, confirmed this and described Jacob as a man of 20, the son of an executioner's assistant, and Barbara was to have taught him the, quote, profession of begging, theft, and fraud. Now, Barbara Colleran was executed in August 1675. The authorities issued a warrant for the arrest of her son. He became known as Wizard Jackal or Magician Jackal. So if you look this up, that's who they're talking about when they mention Wizard Jackal or Magician Jackal was Paul Jacob Kohler, this lady's son. Now, in 1677, the government had arrested a beggar boy, Dionysius Feldner. He was a handicapped 12-year-old who was called Dirty Animal. What a great nickname for somebody.
Yeah, that's right.
Just call him Dirty Animal. That's fantastic. That's also sarcasm, if y'all didn't get that. He was to have had contact with Jackal 3 weeks earlier. Now, the boy confessed that Jackal was the leader of gangs of poor beggar children and teenagers from the slum who he taught black magic. Now, this led to mass arrests of homeless children and teenagers. The hysteria spread to the entire archbishopric bishopric. That's a hard word. But all of the archbishops kind of gained this hysteria and were doing the same thing. So it's already different than the Salem witch trials. Instead of women in the settlement, they're going after homeless children and teenagers because apparently this jackal guy was teaching all of them black magic.
Yep.
Now, during the interrogations of the captive beggar teenagers, the confessions of the prisoners led to more and more myths about Jackal. He was claimed to be able to make himself invisible and enchant mice and rats, which ruin the harvest of farmers. So that, and we've heard that before in witch trials, that they are the reason that crops die and, somebody gets sick from eating something. It's the witches and the wizards of the area. Now, he was portrayed as a murderer, and the rumors eventually made him so cruel that the officials preferred to avoid capturing him. He was the most famous wizard in the city's history, but he was never captured himself because they just kind of stopped looking because the myths grew so much that they didn't want to try to capture him because they were afraid he'd hex them or kill them or something.
That's right. They were scared of him. It was a Kaiser Soze kind of guy, Yeah. You don't mess with him. And the more kids that they would arrest, like Adam said, the legends got more and more and more outlandish. So yeah, they just quit looking because they thought if we catch him, he's going to kill us all.
Right. So that's what helped him get away. Good for him. That worked out in his favor. Where for a lot of these others, it didn't. But the witch trial, it goes on to say the witch trial, on the other hand, developed into a great hunt of beggars, homeless, and poor children and teenagers, especially gangs were targeted. Many were accused of having caused some of the bad weather from the previous years. Now, 139 people were executed as the followers of Jackal in this trial. 39 of them, Matt, were children between the ages of 10 and 14.
Unbelievable.
Can you imagine that? I just can't imagine that. 53 were teenagers and young adults between the ages of 15 and 21. 21 of unknown age. 113 were of male gender. Everyone except 2 were beggars. The youngest was Hanurl, 10 years old, and the oldest was Margaret Reinberg, 80 years old. 109 were executed during just 1681. So the other 30 were in, subsequent years, but a lot in that 1 year. They were tortured and burned, some of them alive, others after having been hanged or decapitated, some of them after having their hands cut off and marked with burning iron.
That's just insane.
Right? I mean, so Matt and I were talking before the mics came on, and being that Moosham was not only the hub of this, but these executions and tortures and things were carried out on the grounds and under the castle and the torture chambers. And we were talking about some of the stuff that we had seen in like some interview videos and stuff.
Yeah. And this was under the direction of the archbishops that ran the area that lived in the castle. Right.
So there was some crazy tortures that happened, and Matt will get into some of that here in a little bit when he's getting into some of the hauntings. But after the witch trials, Moosham kind of went back to business as usual, as much as business as usual is usual for a castle in those times.
Right.
That was until the late 18th century, when it experienced another period of quote-unquote trouble. Now, Archbishop Count Hieronymus von Colorado dissolved the Moosham bailiwick in 1790 so that there was no funding from the church anymore, and the castle began to fall into disrepair. So he dissolved something that the castle was getting money from the church to keep up maintenance and run it, and so then it didn't have the incoming money, and so it kind of started falling apart. Now, not too long after that, there were reports of deer and cattle being found dead on the grounds of the castle. So the locals jumped to the conclusion, rightfully so or not, I don't know, but they jumped to the conclusion that there were werewolves at the castle.
Yeah, why not?
Sounds legit, right?
Yeah, might as well. I mean,
from our werewolf episode, all it takes is a belt.
That's
all
right.
You need is a certain belt. Put it on, and hey, there's a werewolf. So at this point, the residents of Moosham Castle were rounded up and murdered for their nighttime adventures in werewolfing. I came up with werewolfing myself.
Adventures in werewolfing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's the title of my next screenplay, Adventures in Werewolfing. Now, after this, the castle remained abandoned for several decades, and it wasn't until 1886 when Austrian explorer and patron of the arts Count Johann Nepomuk Wilczek bought the property and moved in. He then brought some of the life back to the castle. He began restoring it, and it still remains in his family today. But you just have to think, Matt, you said it right in the beginning when you said the history was crazy. What other place have we looked into that not only has been the site of so many wars and so many deaths of, peasants and poor people, but also witch trials, but also deaths of a lot of people due to werewolf hysteria? I don't think we've looked at any other place that has had this many different events of mass murder in the same place.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, a lot of the places we've talked about in the past will have one major event that took the lives of a large amount of people.
Mm-hmm.
But in Moosham's case, there are three major events that caused a huge loss of life.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about, hey, there were a few people that died here. There were hundreds of people that were murdered here.
Right.
I mean, just the 100,000 that peasants that died in the peasant war, that's enough, but all the people that were executed for practicing witchcraft, then all the people that were just rounded up and executed for suspicion of being a werewolf. I mean, no evidence, no proof, no nothing. You're a werewolf.
Yeah. The only evidence was that cattle were dying.
Yeah, that's it. Cattle.
That happens a lot.
How about regular wolves? You know?
No kidding.
Just plain wolves.
Yeah.
They do that same thing.
Or just disease.
Yeah.
There are cattle farmers to this day that will have bad years and lose half a dozen cows and steers in 1 year. And it's a major hit to their farms and everything, but it happens. Now, granted, it could have been, we could be talking, and this is just me hypothesizing, and there's no evidence of this at all, but maybe it was old school cattle mutilations. And now we're getting aliens that are doing something, and werewolves are taking the blame for it. What is this mess?
All right, Adam, I've said this before. One of the worst things that I have to do every day is ask Amanda, what are we having for dinner?
Oh, yeah.
It drives me nuts. I can't stand it. But one thing that I always know is that when the HelloFresh box comes, I know that we're going to have a great dinner and some quality family time. No,
absolutely.
For those of you that don't know, Adam and I have talked about HelloFresh before, but if you don't know, HelloFresh is a meal delivery service where you get pre-measured ingredients and mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. You can skip the trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. And that's why it's America's #1 meal kit.
That's right. And over 90% of ingredients are sourced directly from farmers to ensure only the freshest produce and proteins are available right to your door. Ingredients will travel from the farm to your doorstep in under a week, so they're always fresh. Hello, fresh. Now, eating healthier has never been easier with their low-cal, carb-smart, vegetarian, and pescatarian options every week. And no matter what you choose, every single recipe is packed with fresh produce sourced directly from farmers. So, our listeners, as Graveyard Tales listeners, you can go to HelloFresh.com/graveyard14 and use our code Graveyard14, that's GRAVEYARD14, for up to 14 free meals plus free shipping.
Right. You can go to HelloFresh.com/graveyard14 and use our promo code Graveyard14, that's GRAVEYARD14, for up to 14 free meals plus free shipping. And you can find out why HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. So as Adam said, the Wilczek family still owns the castle, and they have converted it into a museum. It is still open today for tours. It is a pretty cool place to visit, even without any paranormal activity. But according to owner Teresita Wilczek, there's plenty of paranormal activity and she has witnessed over the years. And understand, she started visiting the castle routinely with her father, and as a child would even say, you know, there were places that I didn't want to go into. You know,
I can imagine.
I knew that there was something going on inside this castle, and now as an adult and the owner operator of the castle and museum, she still has these experiences. Now, we were talking about the witch trials and everything, so this relates directly to that. Teresita says that she tries to avoid an area that's known as the waiting room. Now, the waiting room in the castle is where suspected witches would be held just prior to being shoved into a hole in the floor where they would fall down into the judgment room. Now, I've watched several videos. I've seen, you know, a lot of photographs. By my estimate, this hole it's got to be a 15 to 20 foot drop.
Yeah.
Onto a stone floor. I mean, they're not pushing you off and you're landing in a big pile of hay or pillows or something.
Right.
I mean, you're hitting the floor from that high.
Just think about standing on a roof that's about 20 foot tall and jumping off.
Mm-hmm.
That's controlled, and you're still going to hurt yourself. You're not going to come out of that unscathed.
Yeah.
And then just think about somebody shoving you off of this roof, you know, maybe head first, maybe sideways. You're going to break something. You're going to hurt.
Yeah. And understand, in these trials, there weren't people that got acquitted.
No.
I mean, you were guilty.
Mm-hmm.
And so as Teresita describes it, these people would stand in this room and witness this and know they were about to die.
Yep.
And that's going to leave an energy somewhere, that grief, panic, fear, knowing, that you're this close to death and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And the fall
I can't even
itself,
imagine that. Like, I can't fathom.
You're just standing there just waiting.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like, lambs to the slaughter. I mean, you knew what was going to happen.
Yep.
And to watch these people be pushed into this hole in the floor and fall down below. I mean, I would imagine that the fall itself probably killed many of them.
Oh yeah.
But it definitely injured, folks from the fall. They're laying there now hurt. And now they go, what they fall into is called the judgment room, where, they were found guilty or not guilty. Well,
that's not a good name.
Right.
I don't like the name of that.
They were found guilty or really guilty.
Yeah, right.
There was, like I said, they don't acquit anybody. You're guilty. And then they drag you into the torture chamber, to meet your final fate. Sometimes that came quickly, but most often they were tortured for extended periods of time. And a lot of times they would just confess to stop the torture.
Yeah, just to get it over with.
I'd rather be dead than have to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the manner in which they were executed, they were beheaded or hanged. As Adam mentioned earlier, some of them were burned, or they were burned with hot irons. But they also had a method that was similar to being drawn and quartered, where they would just attach your arms to one horse and your legs to another and pretty much just split you in half.
Yeah. That's just, that's brutal.
Which is awful because you don't die immediately.
No. And we looked into old torture things in a Patreon, I think, and that was one of probably the worst that we saw. So, again, this all happened under the govern of the archbishops. Mm-hmm.
And Teresita says that the room of Tony was where the man behind all of this torture lived. Now, there have been reports of seeing Tony's ghost sitting in the corner of this room. Now, the other rooms also have some activity. The hunting room is another place that's pretty active. And Teresita said that on one occasion, she was with her father coming in to open the museum, and he noticed that the guns that hang on the wall were all turned upside down. The room had been locked and no one else could have been inside.
That's weird.
When going into these rooms, a lot of visitors will say that they feel a dark presence around them. Staff also has said that they feel this presence. Now, various voices have been recorded during EVP sessions in the castle, and some people have even felt someone breathing on them. And the breathing thing is very common. You see it in multiple investigations. You see it in descriptions of the castle. So that is probably one of the most common things that people experience when they visit the castle. Now, visitors have also claimed to have felt hands and an unseen presence near them when they enter the torture chamber. This would be the place that I would think was really haunted, because this is where a lot of people eventually died. But staff and visitors report being touched, hearing banging sounds, hearing footsteps. The doors will open and close suddenly, and there is a strange white mist that will appear just out of the blue. Just all of a sudden, there's a white mist in the room.
It's been a while since we've heard about mist figures.
I know. Shadows are also reported to be seen moving about in the torture chamber. Now, one employee, Gundy Planitzer, she is, like I said, an employee of the Castle Now Museum. She reported that she was leading a tour in the torture chamber with a school class. I don't know if it was a middle school class. When she felt something touching her hair. Now, Gundy describes the feeling as human fingers running through her hair. This is also something that I found that happens very commonly. You know, female visitors will report that sensation of somebody running their fingers through your hair. And, you know, I don't have any hair, but I used to. And I know that's a sensation you can pick out.
Specific, very specific.
Something brushes by you, you catch a breeze, you know, and it blows your hair in the back, and you're like, oh, what was that? You know, but the feeling of somebody's fingers combing through your hair, you can detect that. So,
oh yeah,
I mean, this is something that people are saying. They're not saying something touched my hair, I felt my hair move. They're all saying I felt fingers running through my hair. So
that's creepy.
So you may want to get a haircut before you visit.
Yeah, right. Wear a hat.
Now, staff claims that you can still hear screams of the prisoners at night. And if you find yourself in one of the dungeons, you might hear someone whisper in your ear or even push you. Now, they say that you can feel the anger and pain of the people who suffered there. I mean, you know, like we said, these people were there and they were waiting to die. I mean, they knew they weren't coming away from this. You know, no matter what they did, no matter what they said, this was where they were going to meet their end.
Yeah.
And that's gonna leave a mark. But it, you know, if you were totally innocent and you were accused of practicing witchcraft, which you knew you didn't, but you also knew that there was nothing you could do about it. I mean, that would make you angry.
Oh, yeah.
It would make me angry. And so the despair and the anger and the grief and the sadness, you know, it weighs on the atmosphere inside Moosham Castle. Now, I know we don't do this a lot. Sometimes I'll mention some of these, but this one in particular was pretty interesting. So during an investigation by Ghost Hunters International, an apparition of a man sitting in the dining room was actually caught on film. Now, you can go back and look at this, and you can try to make the determination if, you know, it's actually something. But it was assumed to be the spirit of a caretaker named Anton. Now, during this investigation, Joe and Ashley reported physical touching while in the torture chamber, with Joe feeling pressure on his jacket and Ashley having the sensation of fingers moving up and down her legs. So they're getting a little frisky in the torture chamber.
Right. You keep your hands off the lady investigators now. Now, some questionable EVPs were also recorded in the torture chamber. Now, I say questionable because you can obviously hear something, but it's really difficult to decipher what's being said without subtitles leading you to hear it. Now, understandably, we're talking about an audio recording that has been recorded onto video and then played on television, so there's always a chance that the subtleties are lost. Sure, yeah. I would assume that that's a big part of it, is if you were to hear the original recording, you would probably catch more of what they're talking about. But like you said, it's been re-recorded and then compressed to go as the audio for a TV show. So it's gonna mellow it out some. I know just from doing our audio, if I compress something too much, it gets muddled. and it'll go from this crisp, clear audio to blah, 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 sound like you got peanut butter in your mouth. So I can understand.
Yeah. One thing I always think is funny is we're in Austria. Okay. Why would I expect to hear EVPs in English?
Yep. That's a good question.
I mean, honestly,
I've thought that before too. I've heard people try to explain it by, and I don't know how much I would believe it, but they say that as a spirit, you have command of languages and can speak the language or speak something that the investigators, the people there, will understand. But to me, if you're just a spirit of somebody that used to be alive, wouldn't you just keep a lot of your other same traits? Why would you not keep your native tongue?
Right. I don't know why all of a sudden, a spirit, a residual spirit of a dead human would all of a sudden be like, I can speak any language, or I'm speaking in tongues. So I'm just saying it, and whatever language you need to hear to understand, that's what you hear. I don't buy that. I don't know how you feel about this, Adam, but I always kind of feel like if you're recording EVPs and some people are catching them in one language and some people are catching them in another language, like if an Austrian group went here and all their EVPs were in German, then I would say that makes perfect sense. But if you told me that an Austrian investigator and an American investigator were in there and they caught the same EVP and one heard English and one heard German, I'd be like, I don't buy it. That to me sounds like a demon.
Yeah, it's a demon, or you're using some kind of your own bias. That there is something there, but you are using your own native language to interpret what's going on, and it may not be either German or English. It could have been something else, and you're just picking that up because that's what you're used to hearing. But if it is legitimately, we're going with that. Legitimately, I'll go with legitly though. That sounds cool. If it's legitimately something that is doing that, it is speaking German to one group and English to another group, I agree with you that is demonic or something otherworldly. It's not
an intelligent presence.
Yes. It's not a residual spirit of a human.
Right. And in all fairness, one of the EVPs, Teresita does say that it sounds like a string of German words. So, there you go. I mean, you don't hear them well enough. When you see the subtitles, you can kind of make them out. One is like, it's like, I'm him or something along those lines. They weren't remarkable by any means, but they were captured. But everything paranormal seems to go along with the torture and the death of the people that occurred during the witch trials. Although there's a lot of legends that say that werewolves still inhabit the area. When you start digging into this werewolf story, there's not much at all other than there's usually a blurb that this happened. Because it is a part of the castle's history and it is interesting, that it occurred, but there's no real personal experiences of, eyewitnesses or strange creatures or anything like that. But it is fascinating. I mean, Adam and I kind of blew through it a little while ago saying, hey, regular wolves kill cattle too, and so does disease, and so it could be explained away by a lot of things, that they wouldn't have been aware of, especially some type of cattle disease that wiped out half of your herd, or took out 24 sheep. Those people in the 1600s would not have been as acutely aware of a sick animal that was potentially spreading a disease to the rest of the animals. And then just one day, you find a bunch of them dead. But when you find them all, mutilated, cut up, looks like something has attacked them, you're looking around and you're going, well, I don't see any wolves. I'm sure they're there. But your thoughts kind of go crazy and you don't have a good explanation. Werewolf seems to fit. The difference is they decided, oh, okay, well, what about you over there? You look werewolfy.
Yep. You got a belt.
Like, how do you just accuse someone of being a werewolf?
Yeah, right.
Unless they're physically changing in front of you, you're just like, yeah, you look like a werewolf, and so do you. Off with their heads.
You got some extra hair on your knuckles there, so you look like a werewolf.
Yeah, it's just.
But I mean, we
really,
say that,
really
but
odd.
There could have been werewolves there if we believe that werewolves were a thing.
Enough. I mean, there are plenty of stories from this region, in werewolf lore.
Right.
It's very common. It
could have been something.
Yeah, Austria, Germany, Poland. All of those areas right there. There's a lot of werewolf legends.
Mm-hmm.
So, who knows? I mean, it definitely could have been something along those lines.
We still have stories of dog men.
That's right.
So could it have been something like that? Not a werewolf, but it could have been a dog man.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody was saying, werewolf, because that's the nomenclature that they had. That's what they knew.
Yeah.
And not understanding it well enough, they just started putting all these people to death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Jim's wearing a belt. He didn't have a belt yesterday. That's his werewolf belt. Bob over here has some really hairy knuckles. I've always been suspicious of Bob's hairy knuckles.
That's right.
And that doesn't look humanly possible.
Look how his arms hang.
Yeah, look at that. They're longer than they should be.
Yep.
Those are werewolf arms.
I saw him peeing on a tree and he hiked his leg. He must be a werewolf.
See, I told you.
But, when you consider this bloody history, I would say that, sure, Moosham Castle is most likely haunted. If there's going to be a place that's going to be haunted, this is going to be it. And
no joke.
And, it is open. You can visit. They have tours. So it's definitely a place. If you ever were traveling in Austria and looking to tour a castle or something along these lines, this is a good place to go. It's a very, very welcoming environment to scare the living crap out of you.
Right.
But like we said, we were surprised that we hadn't come across Moosham Castle before. But we're glad we did. It's got such a unique story. And obviously some pretty active spirits there. We just felt like we needed to talk about it. So,
yep.
I mean, I'd agree, especially when you hear the owner, Teresita, speak. She's not one of these folks where, you see them on TV and they're going, well, yeah, I saw this or that and this happens and I can't sleep in here at night and all this stuff. She's not that way. She just tells you, I don't like this room. And She even tells the GHI bunch, she's like, you can investigate anywhere in the castle. It's completely open to you. And they said, can we visit, the waiting room? And she's like, you can do whatever you want as long as I don't have to go.
Right.
I mean, she's there, right there with them, and she doesn't want to go.
Yeah.
They're
lived there long enough that she knows where she's not going to go.
Yeah, there was a video that I found where she is going through with a psychic, and he is describing the energies that he is picking up, and he at one point he tells her, he's like, there were a lot of guilty people that died here because it wasn't just witches. They would execute poachers and other criminals there. Not only witches, the witch trials were just the most famous thing. But they executed plenty of other people just for routine crimes. And
it was the hub of executions.
Yeah. He says, there was a lot of guilty people that came and died in here. But he also said that he felt the presence of at least 3 evil men and 1 very evil woman. And so I kind of take that to be, at least, 3 of the archbishops that governed there,
right.
That oversaw the execution. But a pretty interesting place, I would say.
Yep. Interesting, crazy history.
Yeah.
Crazy history. Like I said, this is probably the most active in terms of history place that we've seen in the 4 years that we've been doing this. It's just so much happened over the years, and so many things that weren't just that you could say were of the time, wars and conquering and stuff. It was on the fringe of, the what could happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the witch trials and stuff and werewolf hangings and all that. That's not, as much as we talk about it and other people may talk about it, that wasn't like an everyday occurrence for, 500 to 1,000 years. That wasn't just something that's why we know about the times that it did happen. Because it was so wild.
Yeah.
That we have those records. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I believe that something is happening here, whatever it may be. But what it is because of the energy that was put into this place from so many years of this stuff.
So this is the part of the show where we ask, what do you think? Do you believe Moosham Castle is haunted? What do you think about the crazy history, and would it lend itself to a place being haunted? Let us know. And one of the best places to do that is in our Facebook group. You can get on Facebook, search Graveyard Tales. You're going to find the show's main page. You're also going to find our group, which is a fantastic place. We have a lot of folks that are active in there every day. We get a lot of
place on the internet.
Yeah. We get a lot of really great stories, personal experiences. We get a lot of dad jokes, and it's a safe place to come and share. Nobody's gonna poke at you, make fun. It's a safe place to share, your thoughts and ideas and some of your experiences. And you can also find us on Instagram and Twitter. Just go and search Graveyard Tales. And while you're there, you can go and check out our website. It is graveyardpodcast.com. And on our website, you can find links to purchase Graveyard Tales merchandise. You can listen to the show, and you can become a patron. And we mentioned earlier, if you haven't checked out our Patreon catalog, there's a lot of really neat stuff. It's different from the main show. We discuss a lot of other other topics, some a little fringy, some a little funny. But they're different. They're casual. Like I said, they're a lot of fun. So if you haven't, go and check that out. We always ask that you please go and rate and review us on iTunes. That is the easiest way for us to come up the charts, which just, it makes it easier for folks to find us and brings more people into the graveyard.
Right.
So thanks everybody for listening. And until next time, we'll save you a seat in the graveyard.
See you soon.